Imagine this. It's Tuesday morning, you're in that weekly meeting, and the project lead just drops a bomb.
I know this feeling.
Right. The timeline's blown, the budget is gone, the client is furious. You look around the room and everyone has that look in their eyes.
Paralysis.
It's paralysis. It's like hitting a wall so thick you can't even imagine finding a crack in it. And we've all been there,
Yeah.
A career crisis, a financial hole, even just family stuff that feels stuck.
It's a terrible feeling. It's that moment where your brain just switches from, how do I fix this,
Yeah.
to,
Why is this happening to me?
yes. And that little switch is everything.
That shift right there, from fixing to blaming, is actually what we're tackling today. We are doing a deep dive into Solve It, The Mindset and Tools of Smart Problem Solvers by Dietmar Sternad. Now, I know problem solving sounds a bit like a soft skill you just list on a resume.
Right.
But Sternad argues it's actually the single most important meta skill you can have. And honestly, after reading this, I realized I've probably been doing it wrong for about 20 years.
I think most of us have.
Yeah.
What I love about Sternad's work is that he strips away all the mystery. We tend to look at great problem solvers, people like an Elon Musk or brilliant doctor, and we think it's just a genetic lottery.
You're either a genius or you're not.
Exactly. But Sternad says, no, that's not it. Smart problem solving is a combination of two specific things: a certain mindset and a very rigorous, almost mechanical process.
So it's not magic, it's more like a manual.
It is a manual.
Yeah.
And the goal of this deep dive is to hand you that manual. We want to move you from what he calls a victim mindset, where the problem is this thing happening to you, to a solver mindset, where the problem is just a puzzle waiting to be cracked.
So let's start with that mindset piece, because if your head isn't in the right place, the tools don't really matter. Sternad kicks it off with optimism. And I have to admit, I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
When I'm staring at a bank account balance that's way too low or a deadline that's impossible, optimism feels a little fluffy.
Like toxic positivity.
Yeah, just smile and wave, right?
I get that. I really do.
Yeah.
But Sternad is very specific. He's not talking about that, oh, everything will be fine, kind of blind hope. He's talking about a pragmatic, almost stubborn belief that a solution exists.
So it's a cognitive stance, not an emotional one.
Exactly. If you don't believe a solution is out there somewhere, your brain literally stops looking for patterns. It shuts down.
It's about keeping the search function in your brain running.
Yes. The book uses the story of Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller to really nail this. Most people know the movie version.
Right.
But the reality was so much grittier. You have Helen, this 6-year-old girl, deaf, blind, trapped in a dark world. She was violent. She was wild. And the so-called experts of the time had completely written her off. The logic was that she was unteachable.
And that's where the belief part comes in. Anne Sullivan didn't just have better teaching methods. She had this fundamental refusal to accept that premise.
She saw it as a communication problem, not a tragedy. She just knew there had to be a way in. And that famous moment at the water pump where she's spelling W-A-T-E-R into Helen's hand.
While the water's running over it.
That wasn't a miracle. That was a result of thousands of failed attempts. Sullivan had to believe that connection was possible just to keep going through all that failure.
Speaking of failure, that brings us to the second pillar of this mindset, the growth mindset. This is the idea that your skills aren't fixed. But Sternad takes it a step further into how we actually process failure itself.
He frames failure as just data. It's a feedback mechanism. The Michael Jordan story is the classic example, right?
Getting cut from his high school team.
Yeah, and using it as fuel. But I think the more visceral example in the book is the early days of SpaceX.
Oh man, this story gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
It should. It's 2008. Elon Musk has poured his entire personal fortune into the Falcon 1 rocket.
They're on the edge of bankruptcy.
Completely. They launch the first rocket, it fails. The second rocket, it fails. They scrape together enough parts and money for a third launch.
And this is basically the do or die moment.
It launches, it clears the tower, everything looks perfect, and then, boom, stage separation fails. The first stage literally rear-ends the second stage. Mission over.
Can you just imagine the mood in that control room?
Oh, it was a funeral. You've got hundreds of brilliant engineers who've been working 80-hour weeks for years, and they just watched it all explode. Morale was at absolute zero.
But this is where the solver mindset kicks in.
This is it. Musk walks out to the team. He doesn't scream. He doesn't complain. He acknowledges the pain, but then he immediately pivots. He says, I will never give up, and I mean never. But then, and this is the key part, he focuses them right back on the data. What happened? Why did it happen?
He turned the emotion off and turned the engineering brain back on.
He treated that explosion as a very expensive lesson, not a defeat. They found the flaw, they fixed it, and just 5 weeks later, the fourth launch made history. Sternad calls this seeing failure as a portal to progress.
Okay, so we need to believe it's solvable and we need to treat failure as data. But what about the anxiety? When you're in the middle of a crisis, your brain is usually just screaming.
Yeah,
It's hard to be Sherlock Holmes when you're hyperventilating.
that's where the manage your mind part comes in. Sternad leans really heavily on Stoic philosophy here, specifically the circle of influence.
The Marcus Aurelius stuff.
Exactly. So imagine two circles. The giant outer one is your circle of concern. This is everything that annoys you or worries you.
Hmm.
The economy, the traffic, what your boss thinks of you, the weather.
Yeah. All the stuff I usually spend my day obsessing over.
Most of us do.
Mm-hmm.
But smart problem solvers are ruthless. They cut that out. They focus only on that small inner circle, the circle of influence. What can I do right now? What are my next words? What is my next action?
It sounds so simple, but it's a huge energy saver. If I'm not burning calories being angry at the traffic, I have more calories to think about the presentation I'm actually driving to.
And you need those calories for the next trick Sternad suggests, which is leveraging the unconscious mind. This is my favorite part of the book because it basically validates my desire to take naps.
I was going to say, this sounds like permission to be lazy. I'm not sleeping, I'm problem solving.
Well, there's a right way to do it. You can't just be lazy from the start. You have to load the brain first. Look at the mathematician Yitang Zhang.
Okay.
He was trying to solve the twin prime conjecture, a problem that had stumped mathematicians for a century. He spent 3 years grinding on it. Intense, focused, conscious work, hitting wall after wall.
And getting nowhere.
Seemingly nowhere. Then he takes a break, goes to visit a friend in Colorado. He's just standing in the backyard, waiting to leave for a concert, not thinking about math at all. And then, pop,
The solution just appears.
fully formed.
So what's actually happening there in the brain? Is it just luck?
No, it's neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
When you are hyper-focused, your prefrontal cortex is firing like crazy. It's very logical, but it's also really restrictive. It filters out anything it thinks is irrelevant. When you step away, go for a walk, take a shower, that filter relaxes. Your unconscious mind, which has been processing all that data in the background, is finally allowed to make these weird lateral connections. That's your aha moment.
So the recipe is focus like crazy, hit the wall, and then intentionally walk away.
You have to step back to leap forward.
Okay, so that's the mindset. But even with a great attitude, Sternad warns that our brains are, well, they're wired to screw this up. He identifies 3 specific mental traps.
These are the bugs in our operating system. And the first one is the most common, solving the wrong problem.
This is the Peter Bregman story, right? The one about his kids fighting.
It's a great little domestic example of a huge error. So Bregman's kids were fighting every single morning, screaming, hitting, just chaos. He identifies the problem as, sibling rivalry or bad behavior.
Which leads to a certain set of solutions. Timeouts, lectures, conflict resolution talks.
All of which failed. Miserably. The fighting continued. So finally, he stops and just looks at the data again. He realized the fights always happened at the same time, before the kids had eaten. The problem wasn't hostility. The problem was hypoglycemia. They were just hungry and tired.
The hangry factor.
He changed the routine. Earlier bedtime, orange juice as soon as they woke up, and the fighting just stopped. He'd been trying to solve a behavioral problem, but it's actually a biological problem.
We do this in business all the time. Sales are down, so you yell at the sales team. But maybe the problem isn't lazy salespeople. Maybe it's the product is outdated.
That leads right into trap number 2, attachment to pet ideas. We fall in love with our first solution.
The blockbuster video tragedy.
It is a tragedy. Blockbuster's leadership was completely attached to the retail store model. To them, the way you watched a movie was to drive to a store and browse shelves. So when Netflix came along with first mail order and then streaming, Blockbuster didn't pivot because they were protecting their pet idea. They ignored the fact that the customer's problem wasn't, I want to go to a store, it was, I want to watch a movie.
And trap number 3.
The fundamental attribution error, this is a big one in psychology, is our tendency to assume that someone's behavior is all about their personality rather than their situation.
Give us the example.
The book talks about a company hiring a woman named Jessica. She just aced the interview. Witty, sharp, composed. They hired her on the spot thinking she's a superstar.
That she wasn't.
She was a disaster. Toxic, uncooperative. The mistake was assuming that her behavior in the interview, which is a very specific controlled situation, was a permanent part of her personality. They didn't account for the context of daily work.
So we need to stop thinking that person is a jerk and start asking what situation is making them act like a jerk.
It's usually the situation. And if you could avoid those traps, you're ready for the actual process. Sternad breaks this down into 3 steps: clarify, causes, and create.
Let's drill down into these because this is the real toolkit part. Step 1, clarify. This sounds so obvious, but I feel like this is where 90% of meetings go off the rails.
We all suffer from what Sternad calls the plunging in bias. We see a problem and we immediately grab the closest hammer. We don't measure anything, we don't check the blueprint, we just start swinging.
There's that story about a media company during the 2008 financial crisis that illustrates this perfectly.
Right. Revenue drops off a cliff. Management panics. The obvious problem is we are spending too much money. So the obvious solution is cut costs by 20%.
Which means layoffs, shrinking the product, the classic death spiral.
But one manager paused the process. He just asked a clarifying question. He said, wait, is the problem that we're spending too much? Or is the problem that we need to offset the lost revenue?
That sounds like semantics, but it completely changes the entire solution set.
Completely. If the problem is cut costs, you fire people. If the problem is offset revenue, you look for new money. Because of that reframe, they ended up launching a Sunday edition of their newspaper. They actually expanded during the crisis, found a new revenue stream, and saved jobs.
So, practically speaking, how does a listener do this? What's the tactic?
Write it down. Do not try to solve a problem in your head. Write down, the problem is X. Then force yourself to rephrase it 3 different ways. Ask, why is that a problem? Over and over. You'll often find your first definition was just a symptom.
Okay, that leads to step 2. Causes. This is the diagnosis part.
This is where we need to act like doctors. If you treat the symptom but you miss the disease, the patient dies. The book tells this horrifying story about a 12-year-old girl, Selena, who goes to the doctor with a sore throat and a fever.
And the assistant takes one look and says, oh, bacterial infection. Here's some antibiotics.
Fast, decisive, and completely wrong. It was glandular fever, which is viral. The antibiotics triggered a massive reaction. She ended up in the hospital, skin peeling off, barely breathing. She survived, but it was a total near miss caused by guessing.
So how do we avoid guessing? Sternad talks about using logic trees. What does that actually look like? Say, I'm a business owner and my website traffic is down.
A logic tree is basically a map of all the possibilities. You start with the problem at the top, traffic is down. Then you split that into 2 exclusive categories. For example, technical issue versus content issue.
Okay, so I check the technical branch. Is the server down? No. Is the site loading slow? No. Okay, so it's probably not technical.
All right, so now you can ignore that whole branch. You move to the content branch. You split that. Is it a problem with new content or existing content? You keep branching down, eliminating possibilities until you hit a root cause you can actually test.
Instead of just saying, I don't know, maybe we should post more on TikTok, which is just a random guess.
Exactly. You eliminate what it isn't so you can focus on what it is. It's the Sherlock Holmes method. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Okay, so we've clarified the real problem. We've used a logic tree to find the root cause. Now, finally, step 3, create. This is the solution phase.
And this is where you need to switch gears entirely. Up until now, you've been analytical, critical. Now you need divergent thinking. You need quantity over quality. Just get your ideas on the page.
Sternad uses the map puzzle story here, which I love.
It's a great little anecdote. A father wants some peace and quiet, so he tears up a map of the world from a magazine and tells his young daughter to tape it back together. He figures, it's a geography lesson. It'll take her an hour.
She comes back 2 minutes later, completely done.
He's stunned. He asks her how she did it. And she says, oh, I didn't look at the map. There was a picture of a woman on the back. I just put the woman together, and the world took care of itself.
That's amazing. She wasn't blinded by the rules of the puzzle.
That is the key. We so often assume constraints that aren't actually there. There's another story about Gandhi's granddaughter, Ela. She grew up in an ashram where everyone ate this bland, boiled pumpkin mush every single day. Everyone hated it. But they ate it because they assumed it was a rule. This is the holy way, so we must suffer the pumpkin.
One day, Ela, who's just a kid, asks Gandhi, why do you make us eat this awful pumpkin? And Gandhi looks at her totally confused and says, I don't care what you eat. I just said keep it simple. If you have a lot of pumpkin, eat pumpkin. If you have something else, eat that.
They were following a rule that didn't exist for years. The create phase is all about challenging those invisible rules. You have to ask yourself, why do I think I have to do it this way?
There's one last tool in this creation phase that I think is the most powerful shortcut of all: borrowing genius.
Yes. Don't reinvent the wheel. Steal someone else's wheel.
The great Ormond Street Hospital example is just fantastic.
It's brilliant. So they had a really serious problem. They were transferring babies from the operating room to the ICU, and it's chaos. You're switching life support, there are tangled wires, multiple doctors, and they were having dangerous errors in that handoff.
So did they look at what other hospitals were doing?
No, because other hospitals had the exact same problem. So they stepped back and they asked a better question. Who in the entire world is the best at handing off a complex, high-tech machine in a high-pressure, time-critical environment?
Formula One.
The Ferrari pit crew. The doctors actually flew to Italy. They watched the pit crew work. They saw how they used a lollipop man to coordinate the chaos, making sure no one moved until their specific task was done.
They treated the surgery handoff like a pit stop.
They literally implemented the pit crew protocols in the hospital, and their error rate dropped significantly. They didn't invent a solution. They borrowed it from a completely different industry.
So if you're stuck, stop looking at your competitors and look at, I don't know, jazz musicians or chefs or military logistics.
Look for the structure of the problem, not just the content.
Okay, let's bring this all home. Smart problem solving isn't a personality trait. It's a loop.
It starts with belief, that stubborn optimism that a solution exists. Then it moves to clarity, making sure you're solving the right problem. Then diagnosis using logic to find the real root cause. And it ends with creativity breaking invisible rules and borrowing genius.
And one thing the book really emphasizes at the end is that it's a team sport.
The lone genius is a complete myth. The smartest move you can ever make is to turn to the person next to you and just say, I'm stuck. How do you see this?
So here is our challenge to you, the listener. Think of that problem we talked about at the very start of the show, the one that's making you feel completely stuck.
And ask yourself, are you eating pumpkin because you think you have to? Are you following a rule that doesn't actually exist?
Go find the picture on the back of the map. Thanks for diving in with us.
Happy solving.